So I just finished The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. This was terrible. Really, really bad. So it doesn't help that last month I read They Both Die in the End, which basically has the same concept but is written so much better, and you can't help but compare them. And this one comes up real short for a number of reasons. All I've ever really known about this book is that it's really emotional and that it has a strong focus on terminal illness, i.e. cancer, and that it makes everybody cry. You know, people are in buckets of tears after reading it. My tear ducts were bone dry throughout this book. I'm not bragging or saying that I have a heart of stone. I just think every time it tried to be emotional, it never really felt earned. So I was never going to cry. How could you? These characters are so cartoonishly tragic, you know? They don't, neither Hazel nor Augustus feel like real people. And so nothing felt earned. It was so performative. The way that the whole time it was just oh, don't you feel sad? Isn't it terrible? They're both dying, you know, and they love each other. They're having such a great time together, but they're dying. It's ugh, get out of my mind, John Green. What are you trying to get out of me? It was manipulative in the way that it tried to ride this sort of sad wave. And that's not to say that you can't like this book. I'm sure there are people out there, especially, you know, cancer survivors or people who have died of cancer who read this and it really sort of helped them in their last moments. And that's awesome. But I didn't like it. I thought the writing was really subpar. The dialogue, it tried so hard to give us interesting dialogue, but it did it by making every character, everyone's a comedian, everyone's quirky, everyone's got these random little idiosyncrasies and thought experiments that they want to talk about, and it just felt so inauthentic. I've never once heard a real conversation that goes anything like the ones in this book do. It was so inorganic, and I found that to completely upset any attempt to, you know, feel something real from this. I really think that if Augustus had his own POV chapters and it alternated between Augustus and Hazel, much like How They Both Die in the End alternates between Rufus and Matteo, it would feel a lot more balanced and you would have enough time with each of them so that you could appreciate their struggles, what they want out of life, what they're most afraid of. And then it would have felt like we actually knew who they were and would have felt loss as the reader when, you know, they inevitably die. Because truly, people who've read this book, what did you take away about the character of Hazel? You know, what did we find out about her other than she's dying of thyroid cancer that spread to her lungs, and she likes this book by a Dutch man until we meet the Dutch man and he's actually not a very nice person. What else was there about her character? Oh, she goes to this rather unusual support group for minors with cancer. That felt weird to me, because I would think that support groups would specifically pertain to certain types of cancer. I guess you could have a youth group for cancer survivors and people battling with terminal illness. I don't know. Maybe if more of the book had been based around that, so there was more camaraderie. I think making it a romance was a weird angle, especially because Augustus was so keen. If you told me that Augustus was a dog in heat, so many of his scenes, they've only just met and he already takes her home to his parents and they're swapping books, they're talking non-stop. And I'm just why? You know, what's the appeal? He's oh, you're so beautiful, you look like Natalie Portman. It's okay, but what else is going on here? What's the motivation? Everything just felt a bit thrown together, and so the overall effect is insincere. I never once felt oh, they're so sweet together. I just felt well, this is... The book is a sprint. It's 300 pages, but you could finish it in an afternoon because the events just shoop right through. And it's really thundering outside. I really chose the Perfect time to talk about books, didn't I? There's thunder, there's lightning, there's rain. Anyways, back to the book. I have a question. So when they go to Amsterdam, so the two of them, they go on this trip to, Hazel's mum is there as well, but they go on this trip to Amsterdam because, like the sort of Make-A-Wish stuff, they get to go visit Hazel's favourite author to ask some questions because the book ends abruptly. There's so much talk about this fictitious book within the book, and maybe John Green thought it was being really meta about it. I don't know. I don't really care, but I didn't like it. But my question is, when they're in the hotel, all of the rooms are named after like famous philosophers, but none of them are Dutch, which I found odd. Like Hazel is in a room named after, I'm going to butcher his name, but Soren Kierkegaard, who I'm seeing everywhere here because he's Danish. I recently saw his grave a few days ago. He wrote Fear and Trembling, among other things. His quotes are all over the hospital walls where I'm shadowing. So I found that really strange. Like, why are there no Dutch people? Like, I get it. The philosophers were existentialists, so I'm sure it was like a point about, oh, you know, it's their final days, but still, weird. Oh, and can we talk about when they kissed in Anne Frank's house? What was that? Did they do that in the film? Oh, that made me uncomfortable. Like, oh, let's go to this, like, famously tragic historical monument and make it all about us. Like, oh, let's kiss. And then, inexplicably, all of the tourists around them start clapping. What? So weird. So very weird. I didn't like that as well. So much of the book was focused on their appearance, how pretty they both were. Oh, you're such a beautiful couple. Like, oh, she looks like Natalie Portman. Let's watch V for Vendetta. Like, oh, he's so muscly and he's got these big blue eyes. Like, it felt as if the book was trying to validate their lives, as if to say, like, oh, they're dying and they're never gonna, like, achieve something that they want to do, but, like, at least they're nice to look at. It was like, ooh, like, shouldn't the sentiment be that even if you're the most insignificant, plain-looking, no skills, whatever person, your life was still precious because at least it was there. Like, it was the miracle itself that you got to be alive, regardless of how long you lived. Like, that would have been a more touching takeaway from this, instead of the book trying to justify some sort of, like, value from our two characters, being like, oh, well, they're real nice to look at. Thunder is so loud. But yeah, when they go to meet Dutch writer man and he's like an alcoholic douchebag, like he's not very nice to them, he was fully in the right though. Like, Hazel gets so hung up on the endings for these characters and she's furious that he won't give her that, like, closure, and it's like, well, is that what reading's about? Like, I am always saying this, like, I don't need to know where the characters end up, it's about the journey. Like, she was so weird for that. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point, much like this book, to be honest. The thunderstorm is really throwing me off. I probably should have filmed this tomorrow, but don't care for it. Probably won't read any more John Green. Don't recommend it. Feel like it was really reductive on a really serious topic. There was no real characters. The plot was really distracting. There was no focus. There was no take. People say, like, oh, it's great for YA, like, young people love it, and then as you get older, you don't love it. I think that's quite rude to adolescent readers, because if I was reading this as, like, a 16-year-old, I don't think I would have liked it then either. So I think it's a bit of a cop-out to just be like, oh, bad writing, like, it works better for young people. I think this is just underwhelming. How did it make so much money? That's what I want to know.